Já, góða kvöldið og verið velkomin í þáttinn Leigjandinn, lífið á leigumarkaði. Ég heiti Gunnar Smára. Undanfarnar vikur höfum við verið að fræðast leigjendasamtök víðsvegar í Evrópu og Ameríku og fræðst þeirra baráttumál, þeirra baráttu aðferðir, þeirra sigra og hvernig þeim hefur tiltekist að koma á heilbrigðara og réttlátara umhverfi fyrir leigjendur. Og það einmitt það sem leigjendasamtökin hérna á Íslandi, eða samtök leigjendur á Íslandi, sem hafa nýverið verið endurreist, eru með á dagskránni líka. Það að reyna að skapa hérna heilbrigt umhverfi fyrir leigjendur og fara húsnæðiseigendur, fólk hérna á íbúðamarkaðnum almennt. Nú, í kvöld ætlum við að ræða við talsmann leigjendasamtaka í Katalóníu, en Katalónar hafa barist ötullega undanfarin ár fyrir heilbrigðar og réttlátara umhverfi fyrir leigjendur og orðið mikið ágengt í þeirra baráttu. Við fjöllum það hérna í fyrir þætti, fórum við aðeins yfir það hvernig þeirra barátta hafi verið skipulögð, en við erum með hins vegar núna eins talsmann leigjendasamtakanna í Barcelona. Hann heitir Enric Aragonès. Við ætlum að taka viðtalið við hann á ensku og svo drögum við það saman hérna lokin. Enric, hello and welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. Nice to greet you from Barcelona and wishing to share with you our experience in the Catalan Tenants Union.
That's perfect. So if you can tell us a little bit about the union itself. I mean, is it newly founded? Has it existed? And how is the environment of like tenant organization in Catalonia?
Our union was born 5 years ago. Well, we will celebrate our 5th anniversary this year. So it was born on 2017. And although it was a new organization organizing the tenants, the citizen movement for the right to the housing right was already existing and really active. Before the existence of the tenants union, it existed and exists still in Catalonia and in other parts of Spain, a platform of people affected by mortgages. So people who had a mortgage to pay their home, who wanted to be owners of their own houses. And after the crisis around 2008, banks started to evict these people and asking, even after the eviction, to pay their debts. So there was a movement about mortgages before, and after a few years, also the need to organize tenants arose, and that's why on 2017, a group of tenants decided to organize themselves. At the beginning, mostly around Barcelona, which concentrates with their outskirts, the half of the population in Catalonia. But the last years, and especially this course, we set it as a Catalan tenants union. So with the intention of organizing all the tenants people in Catalonia.
Yeah, in all of Catalonia.
Before a century ago, other tenants organization in Catalonia, and we are inspired by that history, but it's a whole new organization, this one.
All right, so it's basically based on the existing movement that, for example, brought the mayor of Barcelona, Ada Colau, to office, this fight against evictions, healthy housing market. But did this the initiatives that were taken back then, post economic crisis, they were not sufficient enough for especially for tenants?
Yes, exactly. Ada Colau, the mayor of Barcelona, was the former speaker of that movement. But it's true that the movement of people organizing themselves around the right to housing is way wider than Ada Colau's political space, which might be part of it, but it goes really beyond. And it's true that at the beginning, the most part of the evictions was because of not paying the mortgages.
Mortgage. Yes.
But after some years, this started to shift. And now most part of the big part of the evictions that happen in Catalonia are because of rental issues.
All right. So in 2017, you established this tenants union, first in Barcelona, and then you decide to reach out to the broader public of all of Catalonia. What does this group look like, and how did it find together? I mean, was this born like typically on social media? How did the first like organizing of tenants look like?
Well, it started mostly quietly. So people who were already organized in other organizations, smaller organizations, political organizations, different kind of activists start to meet and to think how that union might look like. And after some months of this mostly invisible work, the union was presented to the population with a big event where a lot of people were interested on this and probably felt hope and joy to know that the tenants union was being born in their city and in their country. And from then it has not only growing in terms of number, but also widening in terms of the profiles of people organized here. We have people not only from different parts of the country, but also from different ages, backgrounds, migrant backgrounds, social and economic backgrounds. We argue that we should not focus only on the very desperate situations of really poor economic situations, but understanding that the rental in Spain is itself a situation of instability. You cannot build a project, a long-term life project, in a regime of tenancy that is so unstable. So you cannot take for granted that you'll be able to stay home for a long term. And this is a problem for all tenants. So the main problem at last is that housing is first a good in the market before then a right to be guaranteed. And this is the main problem, the big diagnosis. And that's why it affects in different ways. It depends on your situation, but we share a common problem that we have to face.
Yeah, it's looked at and presented as a normal consumption product.
Yeah, completely. Our former Spanish minister for housing literally said that on a press conference. He said, okay, we have to regulate this and that, but we have to understand that house is not only a right to be granted, but also a good in a market that has to work. And this is clearly the main political understanding that explains why we do have all these problems, because our governments have thought that they have to balance two phases of housing, the right and the market. So
it's this view. It's basically either a lot of courage or ignorance to say something like that towards the public, and especially for those of us who are living under these conditions and under these uncertainties that the rental market gives us. But tell me, in Barcelona, in Catalonia, in Spain as a whole, after the economic crisis, there is this consensus of public movements. They can bring some changes about. We can see throughout. Of course, you have in Barcelona and in Catalonia a lot of history, a lot of references about public gathering themselves, organizing, and bringing about social changes. So there is this consensus about there is a possibility, it is possible to promote social changes and improvement of the rental market. So can you feel at that moment in 2017 that people are still believe that there is a possibility, it's possible to bring about changes, or are people skeptic, pessimistic about the final results?
Well, it's true that Catalonia has a long history of citizenship, of citizens' organization for political changes in social rights, also in national rights, and also specifically in the movement for the right to housing. So this is part, of course, of our history. And this idea that people organizing themselves can make political changes. Maybe the main milestone of our path as a tenants union was the price regulation for rentals on 2020. And this was clearly an example of the power of the civils, of the grassroots organization. The government first was proposing a regulation that was absolutely useless. It wasn't a brave initiative that would have made any change. So the union, the tenants union, said, okay, this is not enough. We are not supporting this. And we get the government to take back this initiative and work a new one and create a new one with us. So working together. And after this, we were satisfied with this new proposal that I might say, we wrote together with the government, and we asked the parliament and the majority of the groups in the Catalan parliament to support this initiative, and actually it passed. So we do have this price rental regulation from since September 2020.
Yes.
And I think this is important not only because of the regulation itself, and actually the prices are lower now after more than 1 year of regulation, but also because of creating this new common sense that prices can be regulated and must be regulated, especially when we talk about something that necessary and vital as housing is.
Yes. So how was the situation in Barcelona before 2017? Are you still at that time dealing with the effects from the economic crisis? Are you still dealing with the consequences at that time in 2017?
Well, for many families and many people in this country and beyond, I think it's difficult to say when the crisis ended, because the government said at some point the crisis have ended and we can feel the effects of a new active economy. But for a lot of people, their lives didn't change that much. So I was thinking now before starting talking with you on the evolution of salaries and the evolution of rental prices. And during the 5 years previous to the rentals regulation, the rentals price had increased 30 times more than salaries in Catalonia.
30 times.
Because it was increasing a lot without control because of speculation, clearly, while salaries were not being increased with the same proportion. That's why this idea of I don't know how to say that in English. Let me check. But yeah, this over effort, that means that we are spending more than 40% of our income on the housing. The OCDE is saying that
the reference.
We should not spend more than the 40% of our income on this, and we call it over effort if we spend more. So now in Spain, more than 20% of tenants, households, families are in this situation, spending more than 40%. And if we focus on the quintile that's with the lowest income, it's almost half of the tenants' population that is in this situation of over effort. So this had been increasing and increasing while prices were increasing and not salaries. And that's why we asked and we worked to get prices regulation in Catalonia.
So what is happening in from 2015 and until 2020, or this few years prior to you forming the tenants union, is that first of all the rent is increasing, the salaries are not increasing. As you say, they're 30 times less. But was there any other trends in the housing market, rental market, about vacancies, or was there like more apartments that were available, or was there a shortage? Was there any other trends that were bringing up the prices? What was like the reason for the rent increase? Was it just a normal market behavior, or was there shortage of housing?
I think shortage is not the situation exactly, because there are houses. Actually, one of the most famous mottos this housing movement we are using in this country is houses without people and people without houses, and it doesn't make any sense. So this is the thing. These houses exist. We do have empty houses in this country and homeless people. So this is not the shortages was not the main problem, but two things happened here this last decade. One is banks almost failed, and the government spent millions and millions of public money to rescue the banks. Banks that were owning thousands of houses, and governments never decided to take advantage of this, that they were giving freely as a present money to banks and not asking them to use socially these houses that they were owning. So all this big park of houses might have become public if the government decided to use this way their public money.
Yes,
and it didn't happen.
It did not happen.
At the same time, big Volcker funds came into Spain, like Blackstone and Cerberus and these big groups buying millions of houses in our country and speculating with the prices of them, controlling a big part of the market.
We have been reading stories about the situation in Barcelona, especially regarding hedge funds from the United States investing in enormous amount of apartments and actually not complying to the demands of the tenants of lowering rent, but instead just keeping the houses empty instead, some of the apartments. We read about stories that there were talks about giving the Catalan authorities permits to seize or expropriate to a certain extent vacant apartments. Was that a part of the demands from the tenant union?
Yeah, well, some municipalities started taxing empty houses, but this was also a slow process. Not all municipalities have this courage to do so. And also, of course, this sector well, the housing sector, the people who are making money of this market situation, started a legal battle on this. So it hasn't been a big tool that changed the situation here. Our socially protected housing is still ridiculous. Are numbers that really do not change the situation of people. You cannot count on this option generally, that you will have public housing or other kind of protected housing.
All right. So can you tell us a little bit, just shortly, about what is the landscape of housing generally in Catalonia or Barcelona in terms of social housing? Does the municipalities build and provide apartments that are rented out as a social benefit?
Yeah, it's not clear. I mean, it's not only municipalities or only the Catalan government who's doing this. Both administrations are building and owning social housing. It's true that Barcelona has a big municipal government. Of course, it's a big city, and they have been building new public houses these last years. But it's true also that in Spain, for many years, the governments have been building public houses, and after some years selling them, which doesn't make any sense, because you've invested public money there, and after a few years, these houses are part of the market without any regulation after a certain number of years or decades that might have agreed at the beginning. We argue that any public building, that public house has to be rented and never sold. So people can build long-term life projects, but we are not wasting away this public investment.
Yes, this is a trend that we have seen here in Iceland in the past 30 years, where public houses that were and social houses that on projects that were built around the 30s until the 70s have been privatized or just poured into the private market. And now
I was visiting a few months ago one of these buildings that, like a big building. I think there were like 20 or 30 something apartments on that building that used to be public but was sold. And so this protection that the tenants had on this building was going to end in a few years. And of course, they were worried because they started living there counting on a situation of protection that had an expiration date.
Yeah, and also what happens with a strong presence of a social sector in the housing market, it keeps the rental prices down. It doesn't allow the speculators and the private landlords to raise the rent when there is a significant amount of the market regulated as a social housing. So
of course, because you know, as a tenant, as a citizen, that this is one of your options. So you count on it and you decide how to use your money and your options. If you have a so ridiculous number as we have here in Catalonia, it is not an option. It is anecdotic. In 2007, the Catalan Parliament approved a new housing law that was saying we do have, at that moment, we had 1.5% only of houses that were publicly owned, only 1.5%. And they decided to fix as a milestone, as a horizon, 15% in 20 years. So that is in 2027. And also they set some yearly milestones to be growing during these 20 years. Never happened. We are still in similar numbers, and we are far away from this 15% that we have to reach in 5 years. And of course, we will not reach if we follow the same rhythm of increasing this publicly owned house market.
Obviously. But take us back to the campaign. Now you met and you formed the organization in 2017. We have the landscape that is post-economic crisis, and you have raising rents. Nothing happened with the salaries. There is this consensus of now we need to act. We need to change. You reach out to the politicians. What is the kind of collaboration that you managed to get, and what is the presence and the media kind of acceptance and the dissemination of your message? How does this happen? And what is the mandate that you acquire in order to go ahead with the demands of tenants?
Mm-hmm. I have to say there was not a big, an absolute consensus on price regulation previous to our initiative. Of course, it was the first time here after a century that a price regulation was really being considered. And some sectors were saying, okay, this will destroy the market and we'll have shortage because people will not rent their houses. Owners will prefer to have their apartments empty, and all these like catastrophic views on the price regulation. But also, I have to say this debate was very public. So we were in media arguing with people who had these other views on the regulation. So it was a debate, but it was a live debate, a transparent debate, and really extended. I could feel it with my job mates and my neighbors and my family, and also my colleagues did so. We could feel that people were talking about it, and television and media were talking about it in Catalonia, especially. I'm sure also in other parts of Spain they were paying attention to what happened in Catalonia at the moment. But it was a big public debate, and also lots of other organizations that are not mainly focused on housing, but that might feel that it is a problem and that price regulation might be one of the solutions, one of the steps, not the last one, but one of the steps to be done. They supported us on this initiative. So I can imagine, for example, the two main independentist association, all the cooperative and social economy sector supported us. The labor unions supported us too, and many organizations that asked for rental price regulation. I think that was very important to, on one hand, extend the idea that having a price regulation is not a crazy thing, that it's needed and it makes sense and it's possible to be done, and also to have this majority in the parliament. If you are having thousands of organizations asking for this, even organizations that are not focused especially on housing, the parliament cannot say no to this big support
movement
of this movement. Yeah.
But so you were welcomed by the media, and you were immediately presented as the body or the institution with mandate to make claims and demands of the tenants.
Yes, I think this a good job had been done at that moment with the first steps and first years of our union. If you consider that only 3 years after its creation, we were having meetings with the president of the government in Catalonia, with ministers in Catalonia, in Spain, with mayors, etc. And that all the governments were recognizing us as a speakers for the tenants' interests. And,
yeah,
I think it's true that it happened informally, I mean, or formally, but just by the facts themselves. But this law of that regulated prices also mentioned the idea that it exists tenants organizations and tenants union, and that they play a role on the construction of new housing policies, because it says it creates a committee of follow-up and evaluation assessment of this new law that we are meeting regularly, and we are going to make a report after a year of existence. And it says, the law, it says itself that tenants organizations must be part of this committee.
That's very well done.
This part exists, is organized, it has a voice, and this voice has to be considered in any new assessment or report or consideration on this kind of policies.
Yeah, this is the way to go. So to end our conversation, I would like to ask you to take us a little bit through the content of this new legislation. I've read documents explaining the legislation and how it might affect the tenants of Catalonia. But what are the main key elements of this new legislation, and how do they improve the environment for tenants in Catalonia?
Okay, this price regulation is actually very simple. It has like two maximums. One is the last contract. The new rent cannot be higher than the last rent, even if the tenants are the same or there are new tenants. A new contract for the same house cannot have a higher rent than the previous contract, on one hand. On the other hand, we have a price index, which is a kind of an average of similar houses on the neighborhood or the town. And also, the new price cannot be higher than this index. So if the previous rental was under the index, it freezes. So the new contract should not be higher than this. But if the previous contract was already higher than the index, the new contract has to go down, so to decrease the rent to the level of the index. So it freezes part of the rents and decreases part of the rents, and no increase is allowed with this regulation. I have to say this regulation does not apply immediately to the whole country, but the municipalities have to make a declaration saying our town, our city has a situation of special problems to, we call it like a tense market situation. Mm-hmm. And so there's some indicators that to apply to this, but almost more than half of the population in Catalonia is in one of these municipalities with the regulation active. So to sum up, is a regulation that freezes part of the rents and decreases the other parts, and does not allow for any increase.
All right. So you mentioned the reference index, or you have a reference price. How did you agree on the terms, the criteria that should be used as a basis for the reference index?
Well, this was a previously existing reference index, and it's true that we used it for this first version of the regulation, but we are also critics with this index, because it's an average. It's a picture of a situation that was already very bad. It was an already very high level of rental prices. So we are comparing the rental price with a picture that's part of an
unhealthy situation.
Yeah, an unhealthy situation. So that's why, as the regulation made the price decrease, we want to refresh this index regularly, so it will decrease too with the rental price. So if we think with every year after the regulation, the prices are decreasing, the index will decrease too, and it will make the prices decrease even more. So it's a cycle that my drive to a stable decreasing of the rental prices.
But the parameters in this reference index, what are the parameters? Is it, I read about the condition of the houses, some of the renovation parameters as a lift, terrace. It's of course the location, the size, and so and so.
It is mostly the location, the size, and the height, the floor. So it's not the same, the last floor of a building, or it depends on the level. It's mostly this. There are also other indicators about the energy certificate, the presence of a lift, or other kind of characteristics. But this.
How about the investment profits? Do you take into account the financial aspects of the owners, the investors, what they should get in return from their investment? Is there any thoughts about the maintenance cost, the administration cost, the financial cost? Because we are here in Iceland building such a calculator or reference index, and we are trying to cover all the different things that the landlord would like to see presented as a parameter when deciding a fair rent.
Well, the thing is, we had some previous reports when we were studying, the government was studying this idea of a price regulation, that said that it is profitable anyway for landlords. So we should not be guaranteeing the benefits of landlords, because being a landlord reports benefits itself, and we don't have to develop policies to make sure they can get their benefits. Actually, even if we feel it as revolutionary at some point to regulate prices, it's a very soft policies. We are not saying you cannot take benefits of renting houses, of being a landlord. We are just saying you cannot keep increasing without control the price of the rent. But you keep being a landlord and having this rent. Actually, in the parliament, I remember one of the rights party said, today in Catalonia is the end of the private property, which didn't make any sense. They wanted to extend this idea, but clearly is a soft and first step policy.
Oh, and it has changed a lot for the tenants in Catalonia. Have you had feedback? Do you feel the tenants are more satisfied with the situation?
Well, there's first of all, the prices decreased, and of course, there's people saying, well, there's the pandemic situation that made also the prices decrease, because we do have a very touristic country, and especially some areas, Barcelona included, are very touristic. So this stop on tourism for sure influenced the situation. but a way to check if the regulation worked or not is comparing the regulated municipalities with those that are not regulated. And clearly, the regulated municipalities decreased their rentals more than the others. Second one, the second thing important here is all these sectors that said you will stop the market with this regulation, etc., etc. This is completely false. We had records of new contracts signed during these years. So never before we had so many rental contracts signed. So also, second information checked, it worked. But
so the scare tactics.
Sorry.
So these typical scare tactics, they did obviously not work, and that came into effect very immediately.
Yeah. It is working. Of course, we have to still check regularly and follow up this and improve the regulation. And as I said before, we will start working this month with the government and other organizations involved on a report to send to the parliament about the evolution of this regulation, and maybe the parliament will want to improve, reset some aspects of the regulation. We'll start working on this now. But I think the last effect that is more invisible but evident for us in our meetings with tenants every week is is the tranquility that tenants can have, being sure that their landlord cannot, by law, increase the rent when the contract finishes. This was the main fear of tenants when their contracts finished. So this is a new situation, knowing, okay, this cannot happen. It's illegal that this happens. So, and this is a big step. Although there's something still remaining to close this, let's say, fearless situation, that we need contracts to be automatically renewed. So we need that to make sure that landlords cannot evict without any reason a tenant that has been paying always their rent.
Yes.
It's not a really crazy revolutionary thing. It was like this in Spain before, and it's like this in other countries. But here, even if you've been living here for all your life and you've been paying your rent every month, when your contract finishes, the landlord can say, okay, go away of your house because I don't want to sign a new contract with you. And so we are saying this should be regulated. This might happen only if the landlord needs it for their use or their family's use and has no other options. And so that's why companies will not be able to do that. Banks will not be able to do that. Big owners will not be able to do that. That's our next
step in the campaign.
Yes. Because it's happening. It's true that this is happening. Even if they cannot increase their rent, they are still evicting people because they don't want to sign new contracts. So this would be the complementary law action to with the rental price regulation.
All right. So the message is rental regulation brings about positive social changes. I want to thank you so much, Enric, for being with us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you here with us. I hope we will be able to continue our talks into the future and possibly maybe have you again with us in the broadcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much and have a good night.
Já, sæl, aftur við vorum að enda við að tala við Enric Enric Aragonès sem talsmaður leigjendasamtakanna í Barcelona, hann fór yfir með okkur baráttu þeirra fyrir síðun leigumarkaðins í Katalóníu, hvernig þeirra starf hófst árið 2017 í andrúmslofti eftir hrunsáranna þar, og þar var líka ákveðin svona vitund meðal fólks að skipulag félagasamtaka gætu komið í veg hreyfingu breytingum á samfélaginu og gæti því komið því öllu saman í verk, og það svona ákveðin vitund og saga sem ríkir þar, sem og það landslag ríkti þar á meðan að þessi samtök voru stofnuð 2017, sem var svona sjálfsprottin frumkvæði leigjenda sem höfðu haft sig fram á samfélagsmiðlum, sem hófu sig saman og stofnuðu þessi samtök og fengu fljótlega bara mikið meðbyr bæði í fjölmiðlum, náðu sambandi við stjórnmálamenn, verkalýðsfélög og fleira til, og fengu þannig þetta umboð fyrir hönd leigjenda til þess að fara fram með kröfur að regulera eða regluvæða húsnæðismarkaðinn og koma á hámarksleigu. Hann fór yfir baráttuna hvernig þetta hefði gengið allt saman fyrir sig og kröfur þeirra sem fyrst og fremst lutu að því að það yrði hannað eða teiknað upp ákveðið hámarksverð á húsaleigu, hámarkshækkun og forsendur fyrir því hver leiguverð ætti að vera á fasteignamarkaðnum í Barcelona eða Katalóníu almennt. Nú, þetta mjög forvindlegt spjall sem sýndi okkur hversu mikið leigjendasamtök geta áorkað með samstöðu sinni og svona festu og skýru markmiðum. Þau eru ennþá starfandi og þessi leigjendalöggjöf sem var samþykkt í september 2020 sem hefur gjörbreytt landslagi leigjenda í Barcelona, eins og Enric kom inn á hér áður, eru í stöðugri endurnýjun og stöðugri endurskoðun og samtökin eru þar helsti bandamaður stjórnvalda í að halda uppi hagsmuni leigjenda, og þar virðist vera komin á góðu skriður á. Nú, leigjendasamtökin á Íslandi sem voru endurreist núna hér í lok nóvember og hafa verið að taka ríkulega þátt í umræðinu bæði á samfélagsmiðlum og greinaskrifum og þáttöku almennt í umræðinu í fjölmiðlum. Þau hafa verið með svona leigureiknivél, eins og Enric talaði hérna fyrir viðtalinu, þar sem þú getur slegið inn bara á netinu ákveðna forsendur fyrir húsnæðinu sem ætlar að fara að leigja og fengið þá út hvað sanngjarnt leiguverð. Og í Katalóníu, í Barcelona, þessi leigureiknivél á höndum stjórnvalda eða þingsins, katalónska þingsins, sem heldur utan þessi leigureiknivél, og þar hefur þetta haft þau áhrif að leiga hefur lækkað til muna síðan þetta var tekið í notkun fyrir 1,5 ára síðan, en leigjendasamtökin íslensku eru með svipaða leigureiknivél í smíðum, og hingað er komið til okkar Gunnar Smára Egilsson sem ritari stjórnarsamtaka leigjendur í Íslandi til þess að ræða við okkur forsendur fyrir svona leigureiknivél. Segðu mér hérna, Gunnar, hver svona helst ástæðan fyrir við ættum að vera með leigureiknivél hérna fyrir íslenska leigumarkað?
Það náttúrulega eru 30 heimili á leigumarkaði og sá markaður algjörlega í myrkri. Það engar upplýsingar það. Það þjóðskrá tekur saman hvert meðal leiguverð á þinglistum leigusamningum, gefur upp hvað verðið en verðmyndunin, hún algjörlega hulin. Það og sem mjög óeðlilegt fyrir alla markaði, en sérstaklega markað það sem eru svona mikið valda ójafnvægi, í mikilli húsnæðiskreppu, ef þig vantar húsnæði og ég að leigja, þá ég náttúrulega með svo miklu sterkari stöðu á að þrýsta upp verðinu gagnvart þér, það sem þú verður og fólk verður bara oft á tíðum að þiggja það sem því boðið, vegna þess að það hefur enga valkosti, valkosturinn að vera á götunni eða fara inn í húsnæði og borga kannski 50, 60, 70 pluss af ráðstöfunarfé sínu í leiguna. Og þetta myrkur, reiknivélin svona leið til þess að kasta svolítið ljós á það. Ef ég má aðeins tala hvernig verðmyndunin Það náttúrulega leigufélög sem sterkin inn á markaðnum, sem við vitum að bara hægt og bítandi að skrúfa upp verðið. Við þekkjum það bara viðtölum okkar við fólk sem hefur leigtar. Ég veit ekki hvort þú hefur ekki leigt á heimavöllum eða almavöllum þessu. Þú þekkir það, það bara hægt og bítandi verið að skrúfa eins mikið og hægt mögulegt bara bljóðmjólka leigjendur. Síðan það kannski einstaklingar sem eiga meir en helminginn af íbúðunum sem til leigu. Það hefur fæst mjög í vöxt að það fasteignasalar sem aðstoða fólk við að leigja út og þeirra starf raunverulega það sama, það bara að hækka leigun eins mikið því að þeir í þjónustu húseigenda að reyna að ná sem allra mestri leigu út úr þessu. Þetta leiðir til þess að verðmyndunin öll fyrir hagsbóta þeirra sem að telja sig hafa hagað í að hafa leiguna sem hæsta. En leigjendur hafa eiginlega engin vopn og með því að gefa út reiknivél, svipað hefur verið gert í öðrum löndum, þá það von okkar að kasta svona einhverju ljósi á hvernig verðmyndunin draga hana fram í dagsljósið, auka umræðu það, hvað eðlileg leiga. Stjórnvöld hafa ekki gert það. Víða heim svona reiknivélar á höndum stjórnvalda, einhverju opinber aðila, þurfa ekki að vera ríkið, getur verið borgaryfirvöld eitthvað slíkt, sem gefa út svona sanngjarna verð. Einmitt af þessum ástæðum sem ég að segja. Stjórnvöld hér hafa engan áhuga á því, hvorki sveitarfélögin ríki. Sums staðar reiknivélin niðurstaða samninga leigjendasamtaka við húseigendur eða stór leigufélög, þannig að það bara samningsatriði hvað sett inn í þær. Annars staðar þroskaður leigumarkaður sem hefur verið lengi, kannski með mörgum stórum leigufélögum sem hafa starfað 100 ár pluss með mikið eigið fé sem þolinmótt fjármagn, oft í félagslegri eigu, mögulega líka í eigu lífeyrissjóða sem sjá sér hag af því að byggja upp samfélögin sem þau að þjóna með því að hafa lága leigu, ávaxtafé til langs tíma, ná eins síðan auka svona ávöxtun með hækkun húsnæðisverð umfram verðlag. Við höfum ekkert slíkt, þannig að við getum ekkert vísað í markaðinn eins og hann því markaðinn eins og hann þú veist, bara helvíti, það bara þannig, íslenski leigumarkaðurinn bara helvíti. Þannig að við fórum aðra leið og við reiknuðum út, tókum kaupverð á húsnæði árið 2020, reiknuðum með að þeir sem væru að leigja út ættu allavega 30% eigið fé til þess að vera þar. Leigumarkaðurinn, við gætum gert kröfur meira, að leigumarkaðurinn ætti að vera raunverulega fyrir þá sem eiga út peninga. Þú getur ekki komið þarna inn með sáralítið pening og ætla bara svo að ná peningunum út úr leigjendanum. Við reiknuðum með að til dæmis í óhagnaðindrifinni leigu, að þá þetta að reikna með því að leigjandi myndi greiða framkvæmdakostnaðinn á svona 99 árum. Húsnæði dugar lengur en það, 120 pluss ár. Síðan settum við inn almennt markaðsverð og miðum þá við 60 ár að framkvæmdakostnaðurinn greiddur á 60 árum. Segjum að þú hafi keypt húsnæði árið 2004 að þá getur haft góðan hag af þessu markaðsverði sem við erum að segja, af því að það miðað við verðið eins og var 2020 og 30% eigið fé. Og svo settum við inn okurmörk sem það að leigjandinn borgi húsnæði tilbaka á 40 árum, sem væri það að leigjendur væri kannski að borga húsnæði tilbaka 3 sinnum yfir líftíma húsins. Því að við erum með inn í þessu viðhald sem byggir á viðhaldi félagsbústaða á sínum eignum sem eignir sem allt, þeir Bjarnaborgin þar, ég held sem meir en 120 ára og allt upp í nýtt húsnæði, þannig að það ágætis viðmiðun.
Þið byggið þessa útreikning á
viðhaldskostnaði félagsbústaða, líka á rekstrakostnaði, það einhver umsýsla kringum þetta, þú ert að gefa út reikninga og svona, þú veist, þannig umsýsla fyrir utan viðhaldið. Við erum með það sem hlutfall af veltu. Og líka greiðslufalls, ef eitthvað leigjandi borgar ekki, eða að ég leigi þér í 3 ár og svo mála í íbúðina þannig að hún ekki til leigu í 2 mánuði áður en næsti leigjandi kemur. Það verið með 6% áætlun á það, 6% áætlun á rekstur, við erum með fasteignagjöld, við erum með viðhald, við erum með allan kostnað sem tengist húsnæði.
Erum búin að taka allar forsendur leigusalana og tryggja þær allar saman. Í leigureikninu.
Þannig ef einhver segir að þetta allt og lágt, þetta á að vera hærra, þá það raunverulega einhver sem vill bara græða með það, sko.
Já.
Og húsnæðismarkaður ekki eins og venjulegur markaður með ís eða dekk eða þú veist eitthvað svoleiðis. Og það ekki bara afstaða samtaka leigjenda á Íslandi, það bara afstaða Sameinuðu þjóðanna. Það bara afstaða allra siðar og battería í okkar heimsluta nema íslenskra stjórnvalda.
Já, Enric kom inn á það rétt áðan í viðtalinu að það var svona hægri flokkur sem yst á jaðrinum á Spáni sem hafði fulltrúi þeirra hafi sagt að húsnæði væri neysluvara. Já, það bara þetta algjör jaðarhugmynd. Þetta algjör jaðarhugmynd. Þetta bara jaðra við að vera einhverjir fasistar þarna í Vox. Þetta ekki venjuleg markaðsvara og þess vegna reiknivélin, hún byggð á því að svo sé ekki. Þannig ef að einhver inn á 1, 2 eða 3 íbúðir og ætlar að stórgræða og efnast á því, að þá verður hann ábyggilega voða sár yfir hvað þetta lágt verðan inni. Því þetta miðað við siðaðan húsnæðismarkað og reiknivélin áfangi í því að siða íslenskan húsnæðismarkað. Nú má vel vera að einhver segi, nei, þetta ekki alveg nógu gott hjá okkur og við viljum breyta þessu. Þá erum við til í samninga það, ef að húseigendafélagið vill það, þá erum við til að semja bara hvað viðmiðunarverð. Ef að stjórnvöld segja það, að kannski eðlilegt að það sé svona formlegra, við erum til í umræðu við stjórnvöld, það verður frábært ef að félagsmálaráðuneyti gerði þetta, það verður frábært ef að ráðhúsið gerði það. Sveitafélagið bera ábyrgð á húsnæðismálum hvert í sínu sveitafélagi, auðvitað þau að vera með svona reiknivél til viðmiðunar. Því ef þú gerir það ekki, þá hendur þessum 30.000 fjölskyldur sem eru á leigumarkaði bara fyrir úlfana. Hann segir það í landsviðtal við einn fulltrúa leigjendasamtakanna í Danmörku þessu leiguregluverki sem þar. Það bara fullir, það bara það að óregluvæddur leigumarkaður, hann frumforsenda fyrir óeðlilega hækkun á fasteignamarkaði. Ef leigumarkaðurinn óregluvæddur, það helst ástæðan fyrir of miklum hækkunum, ósjálfbærum hækkunum á fasteignamarkaði. Það óregluvæddur leigumarkaður.
Og ákvörður stjórnvalda sem taka ákvörðun hverjum einasta degi. Við ætlum ekki að hafa regluvæddan leigumarkað á Íslandi. Ákvörður það að við ætlum að hafa leigumarkað sem þjónar bröskurum og okkurum.
Já, það þessi afstaða, það bara bein afstaða.
Það bara afstaða. Þeir að taka þessi ákvörðun hverjum einasta degi.
En þessi, eins og þú segir, fórst inn á áðan, þessi svona leigureiknivél fyrirfinnst í mörgum löndum kringum okkur og þar
Góðu skoða, þetta næstu í öllum löndum.
Já, þetta næstu bara í öllum löndum, bara ég búin að skoða og tala við fólk í Austurríki, Sviss og Holland og Þýskalandi, Danmörku, Svíþjóð, Noregi, Spáni og þetta allstaðar. Það allstaðar svona, eins og segir, bæði sveitarfélög og ríki sem halda þessu úti og svo líka stóru öflug leigufélög sem hafa haft frumkvæði að koma með svona leigureiknivélar sem hafa haft þau áhrif að sveitarfélög og ríki hafa tekið þetta til sín og unnið svo kannski reiknivél sem þá á forræði stjórnvalda í samvinnu við leigufélög. Og þetta leigureiknivél sem að leigjendasamtökin, þú segir, búin að gefa út.
Já, við sendum, opnuðum svæðið í dag, þetta milli 2 og 3 í dag.
Og hvar geta íslenski leigjendur fundið þessa leigureiknivél?
Þetta leigjendasamtökin.is/reiknivél. Það kannski auðveldast að fara bara inn á Facebook og slá upp samtök leigjenda. Hún þar ofalega, hún líka inn í umræðuhópi leigjenda. Hún svona víða í Facebook, en leigjendasamtökin.is/reiknivél. Þá á fólk að finna það. Það líka þetta gangi leigjendasamtökin, það annars vegar reiknivélin og hins vegar skráning. Þetta svona fátækt hjá okkur, þetta við erum til dæmis nýendurist samtök, fólk sem í mikillum fjárhagsvandræðum, en við höfum ekki mikið umleggis, en þetta vel boðlegt og ég stoltur fyrir hönd samtakanna af þessu reiknivél. Ertu það ekki?
Svo sannarlega þakka ég kærlega fyrir að upplýsa ykkur á þetta.
Það mikið við þáttinn.
Já, þakka ég kærlega fyrir.
Þetta fyrsti leigjendaþátturinn á Íslandi.
Já, og bara þarft á mikið málefni sem eru rétt bara farin að klóra í yfirborðið á og framöndan eru bara vikur af fullara efni þar sem við tala við bæði leigjendur á Íslandi og víðar og fræðast bara baráttu, hagsmunabaráttu og réttindabaráttu leigjenda bara víðs vegar heiminn og hvernig þeim orðið ágangi að rétta sinn hlut og sem náttúrulega full ástæða til þess að gera heima líka. En ég ætla að hvetja ykkur leigjendur, þið leigjendur á 30.000 íslensku heimilum sem búið á leigumarkaðnum, að skrá ykkur í leigjendasamtökin. Það gerir maður á leigjendasamtakin.is. Það líka að finna þessa umræddu leigureiknivél og ég hvet alla til þess að skoða þessa leigureiknivél slá inn þær forsendur þar eru gefnar upp stærð og staðsetningu og aldur húsnæðisins og fá út hvað þú átt að borga í leigu. Og það var kannski ágætt að þú myndir koma svo inn á umræðuhóp leigjenda á Facebookinu og segja okkur hvað þú búin að borga mikið umfram leigu frá því að leigjendasaga þín hófst. En ég heiti Guðmundur Hrafn, þetta var Leigjandinn, lífið á leigumarkaðnum í dag. Ég þakka fyrir mig og við sjáumst á næsta þriðjudag.